you can do real estate, no money out of pocket. You can't do real estate with no, you can do real estate with no money out of your pocket, but you can't do real estate with no money out of pocket. This is how you legitimately go do real estate with no money out of your pocket, though.
Well, hey, I had a question for you. Yesterday, you touched a little bit on the BRRRR strategy and the HELOC. So, you know, the HELOC is something I'm definitely trying to tap into. Just in utilizing that, from my understanding of a HELOC, you kind of got to be in and out. You know, you can't hold it for too long, or you know, you'll end up being upside down on that. So, just in using a HELOC, you know, what strategy would you recommend? You know, you mentioned the BRRRR strategy. Are there any other strategies that you know, would be optimal for using that sort of product?
Yeah, I think that, you know, using it in a fix and flip capacity, it could definitely be advantageous, because, you know, you in and out of that transaction probably 4 to 6 months, right? So what you could do is, so let's just say you decided to gap yourself, right? Remember we talked yesterday about gap funding briefly towards the end there. So let's just say you needed, you know, $40,000 from a gap funder. Okay, call your HELOC the gap funder, right? I look at all of these pieces as their own entity, right? Mm-hmm. And so now the HELOC is the gap funder. So when you go and you get this $40,000 from the gap funder called the HELOC, then you, as the owner custodian of the HELOC, needs to make sure that you also insulate yourself and pull out enough money to also cover the cost of the HELOC during that same time frame. So now you can hedge against both sides. So as the investor, you go get enough money from the gap funder in order to cover all your monthly costs and all the rest of it, right? For the duration of that 6 months or whatever you identify the time frame it's going to take to flip the property. Mm-hmm. Then at the very same time, instead of you coming out of your pocket to pay the monthly on the HELOC, you just deploy enough to where if it's $500 a month, you pull out an extra $3,000. So now you deploy $43,000 from the HELOC, so that everything is all tied into the transaction, right? So you covered on this side, it's not interrupting you personally on a monthly basis. And then the investor on the investment is also covered at the very same time.
Would you suggest using that, the HELOC, for like the reconstruction costs as well?
Yes, absolutely it does. So what happened is this. So let's just say the lenders that we have lenders inside of our program that work with our students as well, right? And on average, they would lend, depending on experience, somewhere between 80 to 90% on the purchase and then 100% on the rehab. So what happens is, let's just say the purchase price is 100,000 and the rehab is, say, 50,000. So they will lend, say, $80,000 on the purchase and then the entire 50,000 on the rehab. So when you go to get this gap, this deficit that you're missing, you're actually, you covering everything at that point, because everything else is already accounted for.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
You tracking? Okay.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, you know, to go back to piggyback what I caught a little bit of what Ardell said earlier, it literally does cover all your hard costs and your soft costs when you go and fill that gap. A lot of people talk about you can do real estate, no money out of pocket. You can't do real estate with you can do real estate with no money out of your pocket, but you can't do real estate with no money out of pocket. This is how you legitimately go do real estate with no money out of your pocket, though.
One of the questions that I had, HELOC was one, but you know, you squared that away, so I'm glad. As far as off-market properties, because I see a lot of them, but the thing is, the amount of cold calls or you know, typing up letters, because a lot of times, you know, even if you go to the city, you still won't, or you know, GIS on the internet, you still won't get a phone number. You know, you might get a address. You know, so of course I've done, you know, 12, 13 letters at a time, you know, mailed them all out, you know, and you don't get any responses. But these houses, you know, I've seen some that's been sitting, you know, 12, 15 years. The owners are in, you know, Northeast. They're not coming back. You know, they're not ever coming back. They don't even have family, you know, still here in the Southeast. So, how do you get around that? I know it's just a slow grind, but is there any sauce to the slow grind?
Yeah, so Felicia asked about it yesterday. She asked, how do you get in touch with the owners, essentially, right? So what's happening is you getting as far as sending mailers out, but to your point, right? If the owners are in the Northeast, and where are you located, Charmel? I'm sorry.
In Alabama.
Alabama. Okay. So if the owners are in the Northeast, you sending mailers out in Alabama, well, they ain't getting the mail because that would be deemed as a category called absentee owner. Right. So in order to then go find these absentee owners, rather than doing direct mail, you first need to go and skip trace the address. So because when you use a skip trace, think of it like the white pages, right? So when you skip trace the address, these people would then go and find out what's the most probable folks that's connected to this property as the owner. Once you get that information, then you can scrub that list and start cold calling these people until you actually find out who the right person is. Then once you speak with that person, right, you can decide whether or not you want to send additional mailer to them or what have you. But at that point, you got them on the phone. So I don't, you wouldn't necessarily need a mailer at that point. You would just need a good script so that you can then talk to them and get them to a point of, making a decision whether they want to sell the property to you or not.